I'm with the Insurance Bureau of Canada, and IBC, as we call ourselves, is the National Industry Trade Association representing companies that sell home, car, and business insurance. And my role there within Ontario is as the Director of Consumer and Industry Relations, and that focuses primarily on education and information for consumers on insurance-related issues. Part of that includes going out when disasters strike communities to assist people with the claims process and linking them with their insurance providers to start the claims ball rolling, as well as going out and providing education and training to groups, individuals on insurance. We talk about types of coverages they may need, how to access their policies, and we also have a consumer information center that allows consumers to call in or email us with questions, and I manage the team that does that. We have a very experienced team, myself included. I've got 25 years almost within the insurance industry in Canada. I guess being in insurance, water is one of those events that's a covered peril on most property insurance policies and even automobile insurance policies. If you have a car that floods, whether or not it was an intentional act of driving through a puddle or it's just something of where you parked, flood and water impacts insurance. So I think from the start of my career in the industry as a claims adjuster 25 years ago, you dealt with the odd claim, more so on property insurance side. Recently, because the term that I like to use, water is the new fire, which means that as an industry, we're seeing a lot more water damage claims than fire claims, which is what property insurance really was focused on when it first was developed. Our involvement in flooding and water has been tremendous. It's really been the lion's share of what we do because it is a new and involving area for damage to properties, homes, businesses, and the like. Really was highlighted for us as an industry back in 2013. That's the year we had the flooding in Alberta and Calgary and High River. That was also the year that we saw a $1 billion storm do damage to properties in the GTA in Toronto primarily with flooded basements and the like. So for the last 5 years we've been really active on the flood file, so to speak. Our partnerships typically involve, I guess, three groups or three areas, and one is government. We work with government a great deal to highlight the issues related to property and casualty insurance and what the industry is seeing. And so on one of those initiatives, we've partnered with the National Roundtable on Flood Risk through our national office, and that works with federal and provincial governments. We're looking at the establishment of a backstop flood program, because Canada doesn't have one, and so there are areas where flooding is an issue and insurance availability is also a challenge. As well, we've done work with the Resiliency Planning Workshop to do presentations to municipal leaders on the topic of flood insurance. One of the more current initiatives is our sponsorship with the Toronto Home Resiliency Program, and that involves the industry through IBC, the Intact Centre, the City of Toronto, and the like, and that is really an exciting opportunity to highlight for homeowners some of the things that they need to be aware of and watch out for. One of the fun type of events that we do with, so government and business is one side, but just consumers even. As a trade association, we look for opportunities to educate consumers. And one of the campaigns that we have embarked upon this year is our Flood Factor Tour. And that takes a display out to communities where we educate and update individuals on their potential flood risk highlighting what could happen if their basement fills with water and the possibility of seeing valuables and sports equipment and furniture floating in water, which no one wants to see, but also highlight for homeowners their flood risk based on flood mapping. So as an industry trade association, we have been working with member companies and government in terms of highlighting flood risk by mapping those flood risks in communities. And so through Flood Factor, participants can actually look at their neighborhoods and see what the likelihood is of being flooded either through rivers, streams, or underground rivers and streams, and just even topography, things that homeowners need to consider. Understanding what the risk is. Many times homeowners won't consider a risk until they face it head on. We've seen that with floods in Toronto, Eastern Ontario last year, communities like Windsor and Essex in 2016, late 2016, and in summer of 2017. Within 2 months, they had 2 large-scale events that resulted in flooding of people's properties. And many times when we're out there in the community talking to homeowners, it's their level of understanding because they have been in their home for so long or so many years in some cases, and they never have been flooded. Well, it only takes once to really highlight for them and raise the level of awareness that it's possible. And we're seeing that with the greater severity that storms are occurring in across the country. We are looking at events that we never experienced in the past or with increased frequency. And so people now are being more aware of it. That and the fact that it's in the news, it's in the media, so it is top of mind, and that's a good thing because it forces individual homeowners to look inside their homes as well to say, what can I do? But then also outside and say, okay, how do I keep the water from penetrating into my house? Well, a lot of the work that we've been doing is designed to highlight that for homeowners. And we do it from an insurance perspective. We're trying to assist homeowners in understanding what coverages they do need, and the property and casualty insurance market is expanding their level of coverage for water damage. And so more and more companies are offering more comprehensive water insurance options. And so that's important to highlight for people. Here's what you may be qualified for, here's what may be covered and what still may not be covered. And so that is part of the education and challenging process in terms of increasing awareness and helping consumers and homeowners look at what they can do. And sometimes it's very simple. It can be something like extending a downspout far enough away from a property line. Other times it may be more of a challenge depending on where that home is located. If it's abutting a body of water, if it's a lakefront or waterfront property, it could be more challenging to get insurance. So those are the various factors that we look at. The Flood Factor quiz basically takes many different components and comprises it in a short, fun survey. Again, highlighting for anyone who clicks on the site and goes through the quiz, their level of understanding of how likely a flood may be, to what steps they should be taking to mitigate a flood. It's a fun, educational way to do it, and it doesn't take a lot of time. It also allows people to see additional resources that we have on our website with regards to insurance coverages and mitigation efforts. And as well, provides people online, we have information on steps they can take if they do have a claim and how to process and work through that. Because many times people don't have experience with insurance claims, and that's a good thing. One claim is one claim too many in some cases, and just navigating through that process can be a challenge. So we have all sorts of information available at people's fingertips through the Flood Factor site and on our IBC website. The mapping of properties, which is what that MRAP program really did, it took topography and underground infrastructure and overlaid them to highlight for communities, for governments, for residents as well to a certain extent, now more so with our current version of flood maps, highlights the risks. And many times topography is a challenge. Lot grading is a challenge. When developments are built, in many cases you have layouts and grading that occurs which is designed to minimize water damage to properties by taking water away from homes. We saw this, especially down in Windsor and Tecumseh, watching news coverage, and people would be commenting on how their street turned into a river. Well, that was because the grading served its purpose and worked as it should, which meant that the properties were taking water and draining it towards the street rather than towards the home and into the basement. And so those types of maps were helpful, as well as just natural topography. There's lower lying areas in communities, and highlighting that water will pursue the easiest path. And if it is using gravity going downhill, and you're at the bottom of that hill, it highlights for you that there's a risk involved when there's more water from higher up ground that's going to be making its way towards your property. So things that will really be helpful in driving the point home that topography, location, and even infrastructure are considerations in challenges to protecting your homes from water damage. To start with, we can the basic home insurance policy has a level of water protection in it in terms of protecting your property if there is damage caused by water. That is usually water from a burst pipe, maybe a sink or toilet that overflows, or even perhaps a stormy day where there's a tree or something that punctures a hole in your roof or creates an opening into the house and water gets in. As a standard coverage, that's available on virtually every home insurance policy. Then you have optional coverages that are added on, and one of the longest standing type of optional coverages that can be purchased or added on to many home insurance policies is for sewer backup coverage. And that's to protect the home from water coming in through typically the municipal system, up through a floor drain, or a sink in a lower part of a residence. At times that may be rainwater, but it may be sewage water, so there's concerns there about that. And that is an option that can usually be added onto a policy. Of late, in the last 3 years, really since 2015, insurance companies have started offering a more comprehensive water package, which includes the first two, but also includes coverage for standing water and flood water. So a stream, a river, a lake overflows its banks and the water makes its way to your property. Or as we saw in some cases in some municipalities, there's a large deal of rainwater, has nowhere to go, it sort of sits in pools and ponds and enters a home. So there's different levels of coverage that's available, obviously different costs for the homeowner, for the customer, and those are conversations that companies, insurance representatives have with their customers when they're buying insurance. Other factor that consumers and residents need to understand is deductibles. Sometimes some of these additional coverages may have coverage caps and higher deductibles. Sometimes there may be a cap on sewer backup coverage for a basement. So if, for example, a homeowner spent $100,000 in upgrading their basement and turning it into additional living space with upgraded flooring, cabinetry, furniture, and the like, they may not be able to insure it for that full amount. So they may have a cap on that coverage. It may have only $50,000 worth of coverage. So those are considerations that everyone needs to then sit down and understand what their particular situation is all about. What coverage do I need? What coverage can I afford? A homeowner should take the time to look at basic maintenance. Again, from a standpoint that protecting your house from water getting in means that water is heading out. So water's not being drawn to the home. So again, making sure downspouts are disconnected and pointed away. Looking at the foundation, caulking any cracks, trying to prevent water from penetrating that way. It's basic maintenance that sometimes from an insurance perspective, individuals, customers think is covered, but if it's a maintenance issue, that's the homeowner's responsibility. Just like ensuring that the roof is still able to withstand storms because it has some usefulness. The usefulness of the shingles is still there. If you have a foundation with cracks in it, when water seeps around the foundation, it has a way to go, and that's typically in through those cracks down towards the basement. So look at grading even. When water runs towards a home and ponds in places like flower beds, you have to consider if there is a tremendous rainstorm that occurs and you get a lot more than normal rain you would use to water your water bed, where's that water going? If the grade is that it goes towards the house, odds are it's going to find the easiest way into the house. And so regular maintenance and just having that sort of keen eye about keeping things away. And we do live in Canada, so that includes thaw in the springtime of snow loads. Many times we don't go outside in the backyard until the spring weather arrives. And so we don't look at how much snow is built up in certain corners of the property, and when that melts, doesn't have a way to get into the house. And so those types of seepage and leakage events too are concerns, because typically many insurance policies don't cover them. And so again, homeowners need to cast a more critical eye when they're walking around their property. I think the average Canadian today is more prepared for flooding in the home. I don't think the average Canadian is as prepared as we in the insurance industry would like them to be. Many times it's because of the fact that homeowners look at their homes in terms of how can I enjoy it, as opposed to what's the worst thing that can happen. And by that, you know, basements used to be cold, dark places that weren't finished, that weren't lived in, and so if we had a sewer backup and with an unfinished basement, it wouldn't be a big deal. It wouldn't cost as much as if we had a fully furnished basement, a few hundred square feet or even 1,000 square foot basement with all the expenses that goes in. So we're still finishing basements. We're still, to a certain extent, not aware of what could go wrong if we have a sewer backup claim or a flood claim in our homes until it happens. I actually had, as part of the 2013 rain event in Toronto, water come in through the sewer drain, floor drain, and in my basement. I was home at the time. Power was out, which was, I guess, a good thing, but was a challenge too, because I had no ability aside from bailing the water out. So I experienced basement flooding. It's a helpless feeling when water's coming in. And the only thing you can do is try and quickly create a bucket brigade to throw it out the front door, and perhaps only to have it come in again through the drain. So I've been an unfortunate victim of a sewer backup situation. Fortunately, I learned from that. I took advantage of the municipality's subsidy for a backwater valve. Had I known about the backwater valves earlier, I likely would have installed one earlier. But again, I'm no different than a lot of homeowners. Until it happens to me, I wasn't really fully aware of the risk that I was facing with water damage in my basement. Well, I don't think you can perfectly say that it's never going to happen. You're still, even after the event occurs and for a period of time, you're still very sensitive to the possibility of sewers backing up and or water getting to the house elsewhere. So I think perhaps that's a bit of nervous tension is good because it keeps us aware and alert at all times, and forces me also on an annual basis to look around the foundation and to see if I need to recaulk places. So it's helpful in that respect. I haven't seen or haven't experienced the type of flooding that I did in 2013, so I assume the backwater valve is doing its job. But again, you're hopeful and cautiously optimistic. In some cases, it's actually the insurance companies who are guiding or encouraging homeowners to do things such as installing sump pumps and backwater valves. So it's a two-way street. It's important because insurance companies are looking to insure those houses that are the lowest risk. And if you have those types of items and done this type of work, it indicates that A, you're conscientious, and B, the odds are that your house is at a lower risk than someone else's, and so that would make it a better risk for the insurance company to insure. So some insurance companies may find value in that and continue to provide coverage. We've seen that again when Windsor and Tecumseh had two storms within 12 months that caused significant damage into hundreds of millions of dollars in the communities there. Insurance companies were re-underwriting in properties there to find out if homeowners had backwater valves, sump pumps, and the like. And so if there were homes that didn't, they could have taken steps in some cases such as reducing coverage available to them, increasing premiums, or denying future coverage. So it's a good step to advise them and inform them. If it just even continues to maintain your current coverage at current levels, I think that's a good thing. The best conversation that can be had with the homeowner is to encourage them to sit down and review their insurance policy with their insurance representative or to shop around. If a homeowner has made the investment in their property, they want to ensure that they've got the best coverage available for them to protect that investment in that property. And so many times having that conversation, suggesting, and we have materials on our website that can be used, suggesting that the appropriate coverage be sought out and the three different levels of water protection coverage that are available. By sharing that information and adding value that way and increasing the level of knowledge that the homeowner has in their purchasing decision for insurance, I think that's a valuable add-on that would be beneficial.